Pokémon is one of the most recognizable brands on Earth, and as time goes on, the world of Pokémon becomes more and more complicated. Today I'm going to be taking on the enormous task of explaining the entire Pokémon game series timeline, starting from creation all the way through to Gen 9 with Scarlet and Violet. And don't worry, we're not going to be covering the shapeshifting Typhlosion until the end. Also, bear with me if I do make some mistakes, as there is a lot to cover, and for the sake of simplicity, I'm only going to cover confirmed canon games and canon lore. In the beginning, there was nothing but a void. Arceus is said to have hatched from an egg in the middle of this void, and after hatching, he created the fabric of existence. In order to bring order to the vast nothingness of existence, Arceus created the creation trio: Dialga, the keeper of time, Palkia, the ruler of space, and Giratina, the shadow of creation. Without time, nothing could move forward or change. Without space, there would be nowhere for matter to exist, and without balance, reality would be unstable. Unlike Dialga and Palkia, the games never flat out say Giratina rules things such as antimatter or balances time and space, but many people speculate that he does, which is plausible for antimatter, but he doesn't really balance space and time in a technical sense. In fact, he broke space and time, but we'll get into that. Also, a common misconception of Giratina's nature is that it's evil, as it is essentially Pokemon's version of Lucifer from the Bible, but is more so just destructive by nature. Once time and space were stable, Arceus created the Late Guardians: Uxie, who bestowed the gift of knowledge, Mesprit, who bestowed the gift of emotion, and Azelf, who bestowed the gift of willpower. These Pokemon become directly tied to the Sinnoh region through their homes in Lake Acuity, Lake Verity, and Lake Valor, where they dwell there through ancient Hisui to modern Sinnoh. They effectively represent and maintain the balance of reality, as their power combined is able to form the Red Chain, which has the ability to control and subdue space and time, which are the pillars of reality. Arceus also split its power into many fragments through plates and ores throughout the Sinnoh region. Moving on from Cosmic Divinity, we have the Earth Shapers, starting with Regigigas, who dragged the very continents on Earth into place. According to myth, Regigigas forged the elemental golems Regirock, Regiice, and Registeel from raw materials on Earth. These golems served as the guardians and extensions of its power. It's assumed that Regieleki and Regidrago were created at the same time, but again, there's not enough information to confirm or deny their exact involvement in early creation. In the Hoenn region, Groudon and Kyogre waged endless war, with Groudon expanding land and Kyogre swelling the seas. Their clashes reshaped the world until Rayquaza descended from the ozone layer to stop them. While the world was being formed by these Pokemon, Heatran emerged from the planet's inner magma naturally, which is a stark contrast to the Cosmic Divine Pokemon. While it doesn't play a vital role in creation, it is a worthwhile mention due to its living connection to the Earth. At some point, Mew appeared, the ancestor of all Pokemon, carrying the genetic code of every species. Now, the lore is messy here. Mew is clearly the root of normal Pokemon life, but it doesn't make sense to lump in cosmic beings like Arceus or world shapers like Regigigas. Most likely, Mew covers everything after the gods. Also, around here is when humans likely were brought into existence. Again, it's kind of hard to tell exactly when this happened, but more than likely they were either created a little bit before the Lake Trio were born, or during this time period when Mew came into existence. Yeah, if it's the former, then that must have been hell on earth. Another Pokemon that would have came into existence around this time would have been the Pokemon Terapagos, who roam freely across ancient Paldea. Over time, powerful seismic shifts tore through the region, collapsing the land. The site would become known as Area Zero, or the Great Crater of Paldea. This is the most plausible theory, but it could have always been hit by a meteor. Maybe this was how Rayquaza got his job, maybe. The upheaval buried Terapagos deep beneath the earth, where it entered a long slumber. From within the planet's crust, its energy seeped outward, crystallizing the surrounding rock and forming the radiant minerals that carried terrestrial energy. For countless ages, these crystals pulsed quietly beneath Paldea, shaping the land above while their creator slept. Occasionally, distortions flickered near the crater, giving rise to strange unfamiliar Pokémon, what modern scholars would later call paradox Pokémon, though in this age no one existed to witness them. The ancient Paldea people would have become familiar with Terapagos, but the means of how are vague as Terapagos seemingly has the ability to time travel. This means that they may have been aware of it before or after the seismic shifts. Once people and Pokemon both existed, the world shifted from pure creation myths to stories of ancient civilizations. This is the era where people started worshipping gods, building temples, forging artifacts, and in some cases sealing away Pokemon they feared. A victim of this was actually Regigigas, who, according to the legend, was sealed away beneath Snowpoint Temple due to humans fearing its power. Yeah, shocker, seeing as it's historically been seen as one of the weakest legendaries gameplay-wise. Also, somewhere around here, due to Giratina being destructive and violent, Arceus banished it to the Distortion World, which is a parallel dimension which is the reverse of the normal Pokemon world. It's implied that humans must have had some experience with Giratina, as the ancient Hisui statues originally represented the creation trio, but Giratina's statue eventually was destroyed. Once banished, it swore revenge on Arceus, patiently waiting for the day that it could be freed and challenge the creator. Before we move on, there is an argument that this event could have occurred closer to the beginning of creation, but this wouldn't explain how the statues of Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina were created if ancient humans hadn't seen them before. The only other explanation I can actually think of is that potentially Arceus gave the ancient Hisuian people visions of what they look like, but that's legit. In Paldea, 4 treasures arrived from a distant land to the east: a set of wooden tablets, a sword, a bronze vessel, and a string of beads. What began as ordinary objects didn't stay that way for long. The grudges, hatred, fear, and envy of countless people slowly seeped into them, twisting their form and giving them life. Each absorbed the elements around them: dead leaves, snow and ice, dirt and stone, and fire, to create physical bodies, becoming the Pokémons Wu-Chien, Xianpao, Tinglu, and Shiyu. At some point, a merchant from the east presented these treasures to the Paldean king, who, driven by greed, bought them immediately and hoarded them in his castle. That greed proved his undoing, as the 4 treasures awakened and their power erupted in chaos and destroyed the castle and nearly wiped the kingdom off the map. Eventually, the 4 were subdued and finally sealed within shrines scattered across the land: the Grass Wither, Ice Rend, Ground Blight, and Fire Scourge shrines, where they remained ever since, bound by the sins of human greed. Over in Hoenn, due to Groudon and Kyogre's endless battles, the humans created artifacts that would subdue their natural instincts and primal power. These artifacts were the red and blue orbs, which subsequently were sealed away once Groudon and Kyogre became dormant. During this time, Skypillar was also built by the Draconid tribe to cool Rayquaza down from the ozone layer when balance was needed.
Hey! Yo, are you f***ing serious? It's Sunday!
The Draconid tribe is only mentioned in Omega Ruby and I really can't say that word. Alpha Sapphire, not the original games. Remakes like this are on separate timelines, and I'll explain the differences later. For now, just know that some details only exist in those versions. In Johto, an ancient civilization built what is known today as the Ruins of Alph, which is a network of chambers decorated with unknown symbols. The architecture suggested a reverence, if not outright worship, and the Pokédex suggests that they may have inspired early human writing and language. Meanwhile in Kalos, they were consumed by a brutal war, which unfortunately we don't know the specifics in terms of opposing forces, but allegedly many people and Pokemon died. At the heart of this event was AZ, who was the ancient king of Kalos. He had a companion Pokemon, a shiny Floette, but when it was killed in war, he was overwhelmed by grief. In desperation, he built the ultimate weapon, a machine powered by the life force of countless Pokemon. He used it to bring his Floette back to life, but in doing so, he cursed himself with immortality. Worse still, his Floette rejected him for what he had done, abandoning him despite its revival. AZ then turned the weapon on the war itself, which essentially ended the fighting in one fell swoop. This came at the cost of scarring Kalos, reawakening Xerneas and Yveltal, the Pokemon of life and death respectively, and it released an energy called Infinite Energy. This is believed to be the origin of Mega Evolution, which is quite interesting as its dark beginnings do correlate with certain Pokédex entries, which describe Mega Evolution as painful for the Pokemon undergoing evolution. Also, I know some of you would probably want to hear the origin story of Xerneas and Yveltal, but honestly, if it existed, then I would have told you. If only we actually got, Pokemon Z. Over in Galar, around this time period they faced the Darkest Day, which is a catastrophe caused by Eternatus, an alien Pokemon that arrived on Earth in a meteorite. Rayquaza, you had one job. Eternatus is a dragon-like creature with a skeletal, almost mechanical body, sustained by a core of unstable energy. Its very presence released a powerful radiation, later known as Galar Particles. These particles warp reality, allowing Pokemon to Dynamax, which increases their size, strength, and durability drastically. Some rare species can even Gigantamax, taking on new forms. During the Darkest Day, this phenomenon spun out of control, which led to Pokemon across the land Dynamaxing violently, which plunged Galar into chaos. Two heroes rose to stop the disaster. With the aid of Zacian and Zamazenta, the Wolf Guardians of Galar, along with their young trainers, they confronted Eternatus. Zacian wielded a sacred sword, while Zamazenta bore an unbreakable shield, which both embodied offense and defense. Perfect balance in battle. Together they defeated Eternatus and sealed it deep underground. While it remained buried, its leaking energy left a permanent mark, which led to the modern day phenomenon of Dynamax. In Hisui, an ancient hero set out to collect the 18 elemental plates that embodied the power of creation itself. Along the way, he befriended 10 Pokemon and together they climbed Mount Coronet and faced Arceus, defeating the creator in battle. In recognition, Arceus blessed his 10 companions with divine light, transforming them into the first noble and rare Pokemon. The Temple of Sinnoh was later built to honor this hero, his partners, and the god they once challenged. Finally, in Unova, there was an incredibly powerful dragon Pokemon which partnered with 2 twin heroes. Together they built a great kingdom, but over time, the brothers quarreled. One brother valued truth, while the other valued ideals. The dragon caught between their conflict split into 2 beings, Reshiram, the dragon of truth, and Zekrom, the dragon of ideals. Their violent clash devastated Unova until the brothers eventually called a truce. But the separation left behind the husk of the original dragon, which became Kyurem. Now that we've gotten past the more mysterious beginnings of the Pokemon timeline, I'm now going to turn your attention to a quieter but pivotal chapter of Pokemon, the Hisui Era. Now, there is some muddled and contradictory information about this era as well, but luckily for us, most of that is able to be answered, although it is a bit convoluted. Hisui is much different to modern day Sinnoh, as the land was still untamed, filled with danger, mystery, and ancient power. Here, humanity began to move from worship to understanding as they went out of their way to study the various phenomena and Pokemon that roamed the landscape. Hisui was a frontier where Pokemon were still feared as divine or demonic, but its people were resourceful as they used apricorns and tumblestones to create the first Pokeballs. Handmade from wood, sealed with iron clasps and steam vents, these devices hissed when a Pokemon was captured. They weren't galaxy inventions, as they were local craftswork designed by the people of Hisui long before modern technology. There is a link between Hisui and Johto through this crafting process, as crafting Pokeballs using apricorns was also an ancient method for them, but it's not confirmed that this knowledge was passed between the 2 regions. Eventually, settlers from a multitude of distant lands founded Jubilee Village on Hisui's southern coast. They organized under the Galaxy Expedition Team, divided into 6 corps: Survey, Medical, Security, Supply, Agriculture, and Construction. Led by prominent members such as Commander Kamadu and Captain Silene, with Professor Leventon leading their research. They sought not to worship Pokemon, but to catalog them. Oh my lord, I don't know how I said that wrong. Their mission birthed the world's first Pokédex, not digital but handwritten, marking humanity's first attempt to scientifically document Pokémon behavior. Long before Galaxy settlers, Hisui was home to two native tribes, the Diamond Clan led by Adamon, who worshipped Almighty Sinnoh as the god of time, and the Pearl Clan led by Irida, who revered Almighty Sinnoh as the god of space. Both clans were semi-correct as they were worshipping Dialga and Palkia unknowingly, who, as we discussed before, are vital as they are members of the Creation Trio. Originally, the ancient Celestica people worshipped Arceus, but as their era faded, the Diamond and Pearl clans' beliefs took front stage. Their rivalry defined Hisui's culture, progress versus preservation, time versus space, and it wouldn't be until the hero's arrival that they learned both were fragments of one truth. One day, a space-time rift split open above Mount Coronet, and through it fell the hero Hisui, a child chosen by Arceus to seek out every Pokemon who carried a modified phone called the Arc Phone, which was imbued with some of Arceus' power to provide the hero guidance. This hero, known canonically as either Akari or Ray, obviously based on the player's choice, joined the Survey Corps and began their partnership with Professor Laventon to complete the Pokédex and improve the coexistence between people and Pokemon. The lightning from the rift that the hero came out of struck the land's noble Pokemon, who were divine guardians of nature, and it sent them into uncontrollable frenzies. Each noble was cared for by a warden, which was chosen by the clans to maintain balance. These wardens were Leon, Irizu, Pelina, Meli, and Gayrick, and the nobles were Cleaver, the Lord of Woods, Lilligant, Lady of the Ridge, Arcanine, Lord of the Isles, Electrode, Lord of the Hollow, and Avaluk, the Lord of Tundra. The hero calmed these Pokemon using bombs and their Pokemon battling skills. Once the nobles' frenzies were quelled, the peace that was built up shattered when the rift's lightning grew worse. Commander Kamado, fearing the hero was the source of it, banished them from Jubilife Village. To avoid eroding relationships between the clans and the chain of command, the leaders of these factions opted to help out the hero in secret, but they were unable to provide them a path forward or a settlement to stay at. An encouraging merchant by the name of Volo, who the hero had been in contact with at the time, found the hero and led them to an ancient retreat where they met Cogita. Cogita, seemingly untouched by time, lived in isolation at the retreat. She revealed herself as a descendant or survivor of the Celestica people, an ancient civilization that once worshipped Arceus directly and built the Temple of Sinnoh, which will later become the modern Spirit Pillar. Her knowledge, archaic and divine, bridged humanity's mythic past with the hero's present purpose. This was her role, to guide the hero by exchanging this knowledge so he may accomplish his goals of saving Hisui and eventually completing the Pokédex. She explained that the rift was a portal to other dimensions, including to the realm where Arceus dwells. In order to close the portal, they would need to construct the red chain, which has the ability to bind space and time together, which would close the rift. To construct the red chain, the hero would need to visit Lake Valor, Lake Acuity, and Lake Verity to complete trials set by Mesprit, Azelf, and Yuxi, which they would prove they're worthy to obtain it. She sent the hero on their mission alongside Volo and one of the other clan leaders, being either Adamon or Irida according to the player's choice. The hero visited each of the 3 lakes and completed the trials. In between their visits, Cogita mentioned that since the trio represent the mind, there may be a reason as to why humans and Pokemon can perceive creation, which honestly is a super complex idea for a kid's game. Since this is a theory, I didn't mention it earlier, but Cogita is quite a reliable source, so she may be right. Concurrently, Commander Commodore assembled a security corps to climb Mount Coronet to close the rift and subdue the Pokemon that had been spotted within it. Once the red chain was formed, the hero was reinstated into the Galaxy Expedition Team, and with the help of Silene and Professor Laventon, they scaled the mountain to close the rift. On their way to the temple, they battled Commander Commodore and won, which earned his trust, and then they proceeded into the Temple of Sinnoh. Out of the rift, one of the space-time deities being Dialga or Palkia, again via the player's choice, came out and encouraged the hero to capture it in preparation for the battle against the frenzied counterpart. The hero was successful, but they broke the red chain, which made it impossible to calm the frenzied deity, and it forced them alongside the Galaxy team and clans to retreat. Through the guidance of the deity and the retrieval of the broken red chain, the hero extracted a piece of ore that was imbued with Arceus' energy and combined that with the red chain to build the Origin Ball. The hero used their Pokemon and the Origin Ball to capture the frenzied deity, which stopped the space-time crisis and returned the world to peace once more. After this, with the suggestion of Volo, the hero gathered almost all of Arceus' plates of power. This task directly led them to encountering Heatran, Regigigas by opening Snowpoint Temple, and Cresselia. Once gathered, Volo met the hero at the Temple of Sinnoh and revealed his true intentions. He revealed that he's also a descendant of the ancient Celestica people, and he was the one that caused the space-time rifts to open. He accomplished this by working with Giratina and giving it the power necessary to open the rift which drove the Yaga and Palkia into a frenzy. Interestingly, he caused all of this out of a love for Arceus, which is more so implied to be due to its power. His goal was to remake the world in his own image by using Giratina to challenge Arceus and eventually subjugating it to control its power. The hero defeated Volo and Giratina, which resulted in Volo giving them the last Arceus plate and Giratina fleeing to Turnback Cave. The cave and the temple become its latch to the normal Pokemon world, as it's only able to manifest as a shadow outside of these places unless it's controlled by a 10-year-old. I'll be real, Giratina lore is extremely confusing. With every plate in hand, this transformed the Celestica flute into the Azure flute, which was the key to gain an audience with Arceus. Volo, disappointed at being on the sidelines, left before the hero used the flute to meet Arceus. Another interesting thing he said is that he'd conquer Arceus no matter how many years, decades, and centuries it would take him, which could be hyperbole, or it could imply that the ancient Celestica people have much longer lifespans than other humans. There's obviously other theories that could come out of this statement, but since there's no proof of him being specifically abnormally old, or confirmation that the Celestica people have extended lifespans, this is just another mystery which may or may not get followed up on. Finally, the hero played the Azure Flute, which constructs the stairways to the heavens. There, they met Arceus and underwent one more trial to prove their worthiness. The hero succeeded, and their reward was Arceus lending a fraction of their power to the hero, which, for those of you that don't know, the Pokemon we know as Arceus is only a vessel, whereas the actual being of Arceus, which was mentioned before, is in another dimension. Also, I just want to briefly mention that that stairway could have been what led to Arceus' dimension, but we don't have specifics on what any of that is. As for Giratina, after being humbled by the hero, it decided to protect the land of Hisui, which was likely due to the realization that it was no match for Arceus if the hero was strong enough to beat it. After this, there's much speculation as to what happened to the hero, but it's assumed that they lived in Hisui for the rest of their lives, which is a bit dark considering their parents are probably putting up missing posters. To wrap up some notable appearances during this era, Shaman, Darkrai, Manaphy, Fione, and the Forces of Nature are all active during this time in Hisui, but it's difficult for most to pinpoint when they became prominent. Enamorus only notably appears during this era, but I'll get more into that later on in the timeline. And specifically for Manaphy, at some point, somebody writes the Sea's Legend book, which instructs the reader on how to meet it. This could be implied to be the hero or Leventon, but it could possibly be anybody that figured out the Sea's Legend. Concurrently, or at least estimated around this time, an explorer named Heath led the first successful expedition into the Great Crater of Paldea. His team descended deep into what was then called as Area Zero, uncovering strange flora, the life-restoring Herba Mystica, and according to his account, Paradox Pokemon. Heath documented these discoveries in a journal titled the Scarlet Book or the Violet Book, depending on which version you had, describing an unknown disc Pokemon at the crater's depths, which would later be identified as Terapagos. Despite the detail on his records, Heath's accounts were dismissed as fantasy and his reputation as a scholar was destroyed. On a less extravagant note, in the mountain lands of Kitakami, which is a sub-region of Paldea, a traveller and his Pokemon companion Ogerpon lived apart from the villagers who feared their strange appearance. But the tragedy that followed wasn't born from jealousy alone. A mythical Pokemon known as Pecharunt, capable of controlling others through cursed mochi, manipulated 3 Pokemon into its servants, Okidoji, Munkidori, and Fezandipiti, and sent them to steal Ogerpon's jeweled masks. The traveller was slain in the attack, and Ogerpon, overcome with rage, hunted down and defeated the trio. With Pecharunt's grip broken, the villagers misread the scene entirely, believing the 3 had died protecting them, labeling Ogerpon as the monster. The 4 masks, Teal, Half-Flame, Wellspring, and Cornerstone, remain behind as relics of a story twisted by both fear and the forgotten truth. Okay, so that's the end of the video. Thank you guys very much for watching. Now, I know this isn't the full timeline, but, you know, as you guys know, I'm a small channel. I want to make sure that you guys truly want to see videos like this, you know? So, I know Pokemon is a big franchise, but again, the videos I've done previously, you know, Persona, Metal Gear Solid, which again, I want to thank you guys a lot, so much for. You guys have shown so much support for those videos. But Pokemon is a series where it's like, some people love it, some people aren't really that interested. So, if you want to see more of the timeline, if you want to see this whole project come to fruition, make sure you're leaving likes, make sure you're commenting down below, and make sure you're subscribing so you don't miss the next timeline video. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that I've missed out on? Again, I want to say, if I've gotten anything wrong, again, Pokemon is a very vast universe. There's a lot I can get wrong, and there's probably bits where, such as like Spinosaur, things of that nature, which I could add into these videos. But again, canonically, I'm not sure where they fit in, and that will require a lot more research. Even this video had a lot of research put into it because there's a lot of things that change and a lot of things that are vague. So again, bear with me. What I would probably do is, if there's something that I get incredibly wrong, I'd make like a follow-up video or something of that nature, which kind of plugs in the holes which I have missed. But other than that, you know, I don't want to make this outro too long. Thank you guys again very much for watching. If you like my commentary and are new to the channel, please do a like and also subscribe, because that'll very much help me out. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care and have a lovely rest of your day.